You know how when we think about getting help for something like depression, it often feels like, well, a really long road.
Hmm. Weeks, sometimes months.
Exactly, weeks, even months before you might start to notice a real difference with the traditional treatments.
Yeah,
But then you hear about ketamine, and it's almost like the timeline just gets flipped completely on its head.
it really does.
We're talking about the potential for significant mood improvement in some people within a day, sometimes even sooner,
Uh-huh.
compared to those weeks or months we're used to. It's understandably created a lot of excitement, I think, and hope.
Yeah, absolutely. That rapid action is, well, it's really what makes ketamine such a fascinating area of research.
Right.
And the study we're looking at today really highlights that initial speed, within just 24 hours after a single infusion.
Just 24
Yeah,
hours.
they saw a noticeable drop in depression scores in the ketamine group. And to put some numbers on that, they used something called a standardized beta, which, in simple terms, just showed a really strong negative effect of the ketamine on depression symptoms.
So a clear impact.
A very clear impact, yeah. When you compare the group that got ketamine to the one that got a placebo saline infusion in that first day,
Mm-hmm.
the difference in how many people responded, meaning their scores dropped by at least half, and how many even went into remission,
Wow.
was quite striking. They calculated something called the number needed to treat, the NNT.
Okay, what does that mean?
It basically tells you how many people you need to treat with ketamine to get one more positive outcome compared to the placebo. And here, for a major response, it was about 4 people.
So treat 4 people, one extra person gets that big improvement?
Exactly. And it was a similar number, just over 4, for remission within that single day. Those are pretty compelling figures for such a quick turnaround.
They really are. But, okay, as amazing as that initial improvement sounds, here's the catch, right? The
There's
challenge.
always a catch.
It seems like it. That rapid benefit often doesn't stick around. Is that right?
That's the major issue, yeah. We're often seeing those positive effects start to fade within, say, 1 to 2 weeks.
1 to 2 weeks, that's not very long.
Not at all. And that, for obvious reasons, is a major limitation for its clinical use.
Right, because the idea of needing repeated infusions just brings up a whole host of questions about, safety, practicality.
Cost, feasibility.
Exactly, just how feasible it is as a long-term solution for many people.
Precisely. And that's where the research we're diving into today takes a really interesting and, I think, potentially game-changing direction.
Okay,
The researchers weren't just looking at whether ketamine works quickly. We kind of knew that already.
right.
They were focused on how to make that initial relief last longer. Their mission, basically, was to explore whether combining ketamine with a specific kind of computer-based training
Ah, okay.
could help to essentially, well, solidify those initial gains and extend the antidepressant effects.
And the thinking behind this combination, it really centers around this idea of neuroplasticity, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
For those maybe not familiar, neuroplasticity is like your brain's incredible ability to rewire itself, right, throughout life.
Exactly. Forming new connections, new pathways in response to experiences learning.
Okay.
The theory here is that ketamine might create a kind of window, a period where the brain is more flexible, more adaptable.
Changeable.
Yes, exactly. Making it potentially more receptive to new learning or new inputs.
That's a really key idea, isn't it? That ketamine might not just be relieving symptoms, but making the brain ready for change.
That's the thinking. It's believed that one way ketamine works is by promoting synaptogenesis, that's the formation of new connections between brain cells,
Right.
and just generally increasing this overall neuroplasticity.
Okay.
So the researchers hypothesized that, well, if the brain is in this more adaptable state right after a ketamine infusion, that could be the perfect time to introduce some kind of learning-based intervention.
Designed to reinforce positive changes.
Precisely, to kind of take advantage of that open window.
Which brings us then to the real focus of this deep dive, this automated self-association training, or AS.
But he said, yeah,
This is the novel piece of the puzzle they were investigating as a way to maybe prolong ketamine's effects.
that's right.
It's a fully automated, computer-based training, you said,
Yeah.
specifically designed to target how we feel about ourselves, our self-worth.
Exactly. Through a process they call evaluative conditioning. And crucially, this training was given after the ketamine infusion.
Okay, timing matters here.
Seems so. They did it twice a day for 4 days in a row.
Twice a day. Okay.
Yeah, 8 sessions total, and each one was pretty short, around 20 minutes.
20 minutes, twice a day for 4 days after the ketamine. Got it.
And what's particularly interesting about ASAT is that direct focus on self-worth.
Right. Why self-worth specifically?
Well, the researchers understood that negative beliefs about ourselves, sometimes called depressive self-schemas, are often really central to depression. They're a core feature.
Okay.
And some previous research had even hinted that the period right after ketamine might be a time when these really deep-seated self-perceptions are more, well, malleable, more open to change.
So ASAT was designed specifically to try and tap into that potential window of opportunity.
Exactly. To try and nudge those self-perceptions in a more positive direction,
Yeah.
while the brain might be more receptive.
So the really important question they were trying to answer was, could this automated training, this ASAT, given right after ketamine, actually help those initial improvements in mood stick around for longer?
That's the million-dollar question, yeah. Longer than they typically would with just ketamine alone.
And to really get at this, they set up a carefully designed study. It was a randomized controlled trial, right, with 3 different groups.
That's right. A 3-arm RCT, which is a good way to try and isolate the effects.
Can you walk us through how they structured that? Who was in each group?
Sure. So group 1, this was the main group of interest. They received the actual ketamine infusion, followed by the active ASAT, the real training.
Okay, ketamine plus active training.
Group 2 got a placebo infusion. So just a saline solution, no active ketamine, but they did get the same active ASAT.
Ah, so placebo plus active training. That lets you see if the training does anything on its own.
Exactly. Does ASA have its own effect independent of ketamine?
Right.
And then group 3 received the real ketamine infusion, but then they went through a sham ASAT, a control version of the computer training.
Ketamine plus sham training. Okay, why was that group so important?
It's crucial. This helps figure out if it was the specific content of the active ASAT, the positive self stuff that mattered, or if maybe just doing any kind of structured computer task after ketamine was enough to make a difference.
Gotcha. Controlling for just, like, the attention or the activity itself.
Precisely. It controls for non-specific factors
Mm-hmm.
and also helps maintain blinding. Ideally, participants wouldn't know if they were getting the real or sham training.
Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into what this active automated self-association training actually involved. What were participants doing?
So the active ASAT was designed to build up and strengthen positive connections with the self.
Okay.
And it aimed to do this on both a conscious level and maybe even a subconscious level.
Oh.
It involved repeatedly pairing positive words and images, things like the word sweet or attractive or pictures of people smiling.
Positive stuff.
Yeah, positive stimuli, paired with things that represent the self. So the word I or me,
Right.
and even photographs of the participants' own faces they took beforehand.
Oh, interesting. So pairing sweet with me or a smiling face with your own picture.
Exactly. These pairings were presented sometimes very quickly, almost subliminally, so you might not even consciously register seeing them,
Okay.
and other times for longer durations where they were clearly visible. The core idea is creating these positive associations simply through repeated exposure, evaluative conditioning.
And there's some other tasks involved too, right? You mentioned something about deciding if things were words and tracking mouse movements.
Yes, exactly. To keep participants engaged and maybe encourage processing in different ways, they embedded these incidental tasks.
Okay.
One was a lexical decision
Yeah.
task. Basically, you see letters flash up and have to quickly decide real word or nonsense word.
Got it.
The other was a rapid mouse tracking task. Move the mouse quickly to click a target.
Okay, but how did those fit in with the self-association part?
They were designed to kind of run in the background or alongside while those positive self-pairings were happening.
Ah.
They helped ensure participants were actively processing the information on the screen, including the positive and self-related stuff, but maybe without directly thinking, okay, I'm trying to improve my self-worth now.
So it's less direct, more implicit reinforcement.
That's the idea, yeah. Reinforce those positive links more subtly.
That makes sense. So what about the sham ASAT group then? What were they doing on the computer? How did that differ?
The sham ASAT was cleverly designed. It looked and felt as similar as possible to the active ASAT.
Okay.
Same duration, same kind of computer tasks, like the lexical decision and mouse tracking.
Right.
But the crucial difference was the content. Instead of positive traits and self-related cues like I or their own photo, the sham training used mostly neutral words and images. And the cues were related to other people.
Like they or others.
Exactly. Words like others or pictures of strangers who were the same gender as the participant, not related to the self.
I see. So the structure was the same, but the core message was different, neutral, and about others, not positive and about me.
Precisely. The goal was to control for all those general factors.
Hmm.
Spending time doing a task, interacting with the computer, maybe the expectation of treatment,
Right.
without providing that specific positive self-association component, and again, helping with the blinding.
So just to recap, active ASAT links positive
So,
stuff to me. Sham ASAT is similar tasks, but neutral stuff linked to others.
you got it.
And the underlying theory is that the brain potentially more open to change after ketamine
That period of enhanced neuroplasticity.
might be more receptive to those positive pairings in the active ASAT group, helping to update those negative self-beliefs.
Exactly. Building on that understanding that depression is often tangled up with these ingrained negative self-schemas. Ketamine might create the opening, and ASAT might help rewrite the script, so to speak.
Okay, so we have the setup ketamine for the quick lift, ASAT potentially to make it last. What did the study actually find? What happened over that 30-day study period?
Right, this is the exciting part. The key finding, really the headline result,
Yeah.
was that the group who received ketamine, followed by the active ASAT, showed significantly lower levels of depression. And importantly, those levels remained stable over the entire 30 days.
Stable and low for 30 days.
Yes, especially when compared to the group that got the placebo saline infusion followed by the active ASAT. This really suggests that the combination of ketamine and the active ASAT had a lasting impact. It wasn't just the initial ketamine effect wearing off.
That sounds promising. Now, what happened with the other ketamine group? The ones who got ketamine but then did the sham ASE.
Ah, yes, the critical comparison.
Right. How did their scores look over time?
Well, just as you'd expect, their depression scores did drop significantly right after the ketamine infusion in that first 24 hours.
Okay, the initial effect was there.
It was there. But then those scores started to gradually climb back up. From that 24-hour mark through the rest of the 30 days, their depression levels increased again.
So the benefit faded, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. By the end of the study, their depression levels were looking quite similar to the group that got the placebo infusion plus the active ASA.
Wow. So that really highlights the difference the active training made after ketamine.
It really does. It underscores that ketamine alone, at least with this single infusion protocol, wasn't enough to provide sustained improvement for most people in this study. The active ASAT seemed necessary to maintain those gains.
Did they look at that statistically? The difference in the pattern over time?
They did. They found a significant group-by-time interaction, which basically confirms that the trajectory of improvement over time was different for the ketamine plus active ASAT group compared to the ketamine plus sham ASAT group after that initial shared boost from the ketamine.
So it really seems like that active ASAT was playing a vital role in anchoring those initial positive changes.
That's a good way to put it. Anchoring the improvement.
Now, what about the group that just got the placebo infusion but still did the active ASAT? Did the training alone do anything for them?
Interestingly, yes. There seemed to be some effect there too. They did observe some degree of improvement in that saline plus active ASAT group.
Compared to their own starting point?
Yes. Compared to their baseline scores at the beginning of the study, their scores were lower by the end.
Huh. So maybe ASAT has some benefit even without the ketamine boost.
It suggests that, potentially. It's possible that repeatedly focusing on positive self-associations, even without that ketamine-induced plasticity window, can have a gradual positive impact over time for some people.
Or maybe just being in the study helped.
That's also a possibility, absolutely. The research context itself, the regular contact, the expectation, those things can contribute. But it does hint that ASAT might have some standalone potential, even if the effect was smaller or slower than the combined approach.
Okay, so let's really try to break this down for our listeners. The big takeaway seems to be combine a single ketamine dose with this specific automated training targeting self-worth.
The active ASAT.
And you get a much longer lasting improvement in depression compared to just using ketamine on its own or the training on its own.
That seems to be the core finding, yes. At least over the 30-day period they studied.
What are the potential real-world implications of this? If this holds up, what could it mean?
Oh, the implications could be quite significant, I think.
Yeah.
ASAT offers a really promising and, importantly, practical way to potentially extend the benefits of ketamine.
Practical how?
Well, think about it. It's a fully automated, computer-based intervention.
Right. No therapist needed for the training part itself.
Exactly. That means it has the potential to be very efficient, relatively low cost. It's portable. People did it at home in the study.
Oh, they did it at home.
Some did, yes.
Yeah.
It was designed to be usable outside the clinic. It's non-invasive and potentially easily scalable.
Scalable meaning you could roll it out to lots of people relatively easily.
Precisely. Imagine someone gets a ketamine infusion in a clinic,
Right.
and then they can continue their treatment with these relatively short, 20-minute computer sessions at home,
Yeah.
designed specifically to reinforce those positive changes initiated by the ketamine. It can make the whole treatment package much more accessible.
And did people actually stick with the ASAT program? Compliance is always a big issue.
That was another really encouraging finding. The adherence rate, the rate of people actually completing the ASAT sessions they were assigned,
Yeah.
was remarkably high, around 97%.
97%. That's huge.
It's fantastic. It suggests that people found the training acceptable, they didn't find it too burdensome, and they were motivated to engage with it consistently.
That's a massive factor for real-world use, isn't it? If people won't do it, it doesn't matter how good it is.
Absolutely. High adherence is key.
Now, one thing the study authors pointed out, I think, was that while ASAT seemed to help maintain the initial improvement from ketamine,
Yes.
it didn't seem to make people feel even better than they did right after the infusion. Is that right?
That's an important nuance, yes. It was more about preventing that initial good feeling from fading away so quickly rather than deepening the improvement further.
So it stabilized the gains, but didn't add more on top.
Exactly. The ASAT wasn't pushing the level of improvement beyond what the ketamine achieved initially, at least not in this 30-day window. Its strength seemed to be in prolonging that initial response.
Which suggests maybe the two interventions are working in a really complementary way.
That's a great way to think about it. Ketamine provides the rapid initial relief, maybe opens the window,
Right.
and ASAT then comes in to help solidify those gains through that targeted learning, reinforcing positive self-associations while that window is open.
Okay. The researchers also talked a bit about future directions, right? Where does this research go next?
Yeah, there are a lot of exciting possibilities. They mentioned looking into whether giving repeated doses of ketamine could interact differently, maybe enhance the effects of ASAT even more.
Makes sense. Or maybe multiple ASAT courses.
Or different doses of ASAT itself, yeah.
Yeah?
Perhaps more frequent sessions or longer sessions or maybe booster ASAT sessions later on.
A top-up?
Exactly. A top-up session, say, a month or two later, to see if that could help maintain the benefits for even longer periods beyond 30 days.
And could they target other things besides self-worth?
That's another avenue. They're interested in investigating whether targeting other types of cognitive or affective associations, maybe about the future or about relationships, could also be beneficial in extending ketamine's effects. Lots of potential targets.
And, like any study, there were limitations acknowledged. What should we keep in mind?
Always important, yes.
Hmm.
They noted this study was really focused on establishing the necessity of each component, the ketamine and the active ASAT.
Okay.
So, because of that specific focus, they didn't include a group that received, say, ketamine plus just standard care or no treatment at all. So we can't directly compare this combo to doing nothing, only to the other active arms.
Sure. What else?
They also acknowledged the challenge of blinding with ketamine infusions. Participants might have guessed if they got the real deal due to the noticeable side effects.
Right. That's a common issue.
It is, and that expectancy could subtly influence outcomes. Interestingly, they did find that people couldn't tell as easily whether they were getting the active or the sham computer training.
Oh, so the ASAT blinding worked better.
It seems so, which strengthens the findings about the ASAT component specifically.
Any other limitations?
Just the usual caveats about generalizability. While it was a decent-sized study, the participants might not perfectly represent everyone with treatment-resistant depression. More research with broader, more diverse samples is always needed.
Sure, standard practice. Okay, so to bring it all together for our listeners, what's the core message from this deep dive? What's the main takeaway?
I think the key takeaway is the really promising potential we're seeing here. Combining a single infusion of ketamine with this short course of automated self-association training,
ASAT.
Kenny,
Yeah.
it showed real promise in helping people with treatment-resistant depression experience a more lasting improvement in their mood compared to what we often see with ketamine alone.
Extending that benefit out to at least 30 days.
Exactly. This study provides compelling early evidence that this relatively brief automated computer program, when delivered strategically after ketamine, can really help sustain those rapid antidepressant effects.
And this isn't just about, feeling a bit better for a couple more weeks. This approach could potentially offer a more accessible and scalable way to help manage depression long term.
That's the exciting potential, isn't it? Especially considering how easily an automated computer program like ASAT could theoretically be disseminated.
Right. Much easier than repeated clinic visits for infusions.
It opens up the possibility of a treatment approach where you get that powerful initial relief from ketamine in a clinical setting,
Hmm.
followed by a brief, easily delivered, potentially at home, learning-based intervention. It could overcome some of the big logistical and cost barriers associated with longer-term ketamine treatment protocols.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Given that powerful initial impact ketamine can have,
Yeah.
how might we see more of these targeted automated learning tools like ASAT being used in the future? Could this really revolutionize how we approach treating depression or other conditions?
It's a fascinating prospect. Using that window of increased brain flexibility, that neuroplasticity, to help people actively build new, more positive ways of thinking and feeling about themselves, about their world, it feels like leveraging the brain's own capacity for change in a very targeted way.
A truly fascinating area with, like you said, so much potential still to be explored.
Absolutely. And we definitely encourage listeners, if you're interested, to delve deeper into some of these concepts: neuroplasticity, evaluative conditioning, the ongoing research in ketamine-assisted therapy,
Yeah.
and these kinds of innovative add-on strategies like AS. There's a lot happening in this space.
It really feels like this study shines a light on a very promising direction, doesn't it, for the future of mental health care?
I think so. Combining pharmacology with targeted psychological or learning strategies,
Mm.
it feels like a powerful synergy.